welcome to another episode of The Inquisitive Analysts. I'm your host, Marcus Udikang. It's the show where we chat about business analysis and project management issues and challenges and triumphs within those fields. It's inspiring, it's inciting, and of course, it's very much inquisitive. My guest today is a program lead and leadership consultant and director founder of the Anode Group. His experience is in areas of leadership, governance, artificial intelligence, and strategy. And he's presented at conferences globally on all of these topics. So please help me welcome to today's show, Dayo Sowunmi. Welcome, Dayo.
Hi, Marcus. Thanks for having me on the show. It's really fun to be here. Thanks.
It's fantastic. And the good thing is, I thank you for coming all the way from Brisbane, Australia, because there's a massive time zone between the two of us. So it's a pretty good time for me, and I hope it's just as good a time for you.
It is. Well, funny enough, it's the following day for us, obviously, but we're a little bit ahead of you.
Good stuff. All right, excellent. So talking about being ahead, let's get down to a few items. I got a bunch of questions for you today, and I know you've written a book not too long ago, so we'll talk a bit about that as well. But first of all, let's begin with a background in project management. What's your background in project management? Like, how did you get into the field of project management?
Yeah, well, you know what? It was really by accident. I don't think as a kid I sort of thought to myself, you know what, when I grow up, I'm going to be a project manager. That was probably the last thing on my list of things to do. But when I was a kid, I wanted to be a commercial airline pilot. That was my dream at the time. And that was probably because I thought, well, within 2 years, you can qualify as a pilot and you can sort of, don't have to go to university for 4 or 5 years. So I thought, this is probably an easy way out to get a profession pretty quickly. But that sort of changed, and then I got advised to get a first degree, and I did that in IT, and then I started working in the field and so forth. But then all of a sudden, I found myself leading a group of IT team members, and I was essentially almost like a quasi project manager. So just something that kind of fell into my lap, really. And I thought, wow, this is actually pretty cool, because I love the interaction with people and also working with clients and so forth. So I thought, okay, well, if I'm going to be a project manager, I might as well get some qualifications in that area. So I went and did that. And again, I just loved that more and more. So yeah, that basically was almost by accident, to be honest. It wasn't something I designed, but the more I got into it, the more I fell in love with it. So I just stuck with it, basically.
Nice. There's so many project managers that have become accidental project managers. They should make a movie called The Accidental Project Manager. I think that's what
you're right. I know. Every time I talk to mates, it's like, yeah, well, it wasn't something I planned. It just kind of happened. And then all of a sudden, guess what? You're now a PM.
Yeah.
But, it's been a fun ride.
Wow, that's cool. So you run a company called the Anode Group. Maybe you can talk a bit about what the Anode Group encompasses and what inspired you to start the company.
Yeah, sure. So the Anode Group I started feels a long time ago now, about 20 years ago here in Melbourne. And it was really something where, from a kid, I've always wanted to sort of, I guess, do my own thing and own my own company at some stage. I don't know where that desire came from, but it was always something I always wanted to do. So when the opportunity came up, like I said, about 20 years ago, I thought, you know what, let's try and make this happen. And then, of course, the first thing I had to think about was, okay, so what do I call the company? And I'm thinking, well, okay, there's a few names out there I could think of. And all of a sudden, I sort of thought back to my undergraduate university days back in Nigeria. And there was a group of 4 of us who were all computer science students at the time. And we used to study together and so forth. And we always said to ourselves, you know what, when we finish, when we graduate, we're going to form a company of our own and just, take on the world, we thought. And I looked at all our 4, the names of all 4 of us, and I took the first letter from each of those names and it was like ODNA. I'm thinking, geez, okay, I can't really do much with that. But then I juggled it around and I thought, okay, so I came up with ANOD. I thought, oh, okay, well, maybe there's some potential there. And then I added the E at the end. I thought, well, okay, I know it is, the positive part of a battery. And I've always been about, I'm an eternal optimist. So I thought being positive is something that I definitely hold dear to my heart. So I thought, okay, Anode would probably be a good name to call it. And then, of course, I reached out to my 3 mates and said, hey, guess what, guys? If we ever want to, do that company thing, the company's already been set up. I didn't really get much response from them. So I took that as a no. But funny enough, we're still in touch, though. We're still good friends. But everyone's just gone and done their own thing after that. Yeah. But that's kind of how it all started. Yeah.
Nice. Actually, sorry, you mentioned Melbourne. I forgot you moved from Brisbane to Melbourne. So
now we're in Melbourne.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Right. Okay. Yeah, you're in Melbourne. Still same country, just not too far
Yeah,
away. Yeah.
true.
Okay.
That's right.
All right. So I read your book, Leadership is Mental. It's been around for a while. So from reading your book, which focuses on human and psychological side of leadership, I see that you're a big fan of Edward de Bono, and we've chatted a bit about it on LinkedIn as well. So what part of de Bono appeals to you, and how can we apply some of de Bono's teachings to project management?
Yeah, well, I think to be honest, the first thing that appeals to me about his work is that he pretty much simplifies things, and he's an advocate for teaching people how to think, and I think that's probably something that we could all
Mhm.
take a lesson from. And I guess I also had the opportunity or privilege, I suppose, in some ways, that my dad was a certified de Bono instructor. So growing up
Mhm.
as a kid, from about age 7, for better or for worse, I got inducted into de Bono's way of thinking. So I think it's something that I've kind of had for most of my life. But in terms of how it applies to PMs, I think just being able to think outside the box and be creative,
Mhm.
and also know when you're in a mental rut, and know how to find different techniques to actually help us get out of that. Because I
Mhm.
think as a project manager, there are often times that we're in situations where things have always been done a certain way, and it will take a change in mindset, a shift in how we actually do things to actually help us solve a problem. And
Mhm.
I think that's where some of those techniques and just philosophies that he sort of puts out there are actually helpful, and I found that to be of really good use for me
Mhm.
in my career so far.
Cool. Yeah, I remember you talking about thinking linearly versus vertically, and de Bono stresses one over the other, and it's a good way to, like you said, open your perspective to see outside of the box. So,
Yeah, that's exactly right. And as I said, the good thing is it's actually teachable. So it's something that no one's born with the skill, but
mhm.
everyone can learn it, which I think is one of the most appealing things about it. So if
Yeah,
I can do it, I think everyone else should be able to as well.
yeah. Good ideas take longer to die, and obviously this one's still alive, so obviously it must mean something truly to
Yeah.
project managers.
Mm.
So project managers are leaders. We all know that, right? They're excelling leaders, and they're also very good listeners. Agile retrospectives are a way to listen and a way to learn from a collective experience. And de Bono's PMI technique can be used to identify lessons learned within projects.
Mhm.
So looking at de Bono, what is de Bono's PMI technique, and how can it help project managers?
Yeah, sure. The first thing I'll say is it's not to be confused with the Project Management Institute. It's a totally,
Ah,
totally
right.
different concept.
Yeah, right, right.
But
True.
it's just an acronym for plus, minus, interesting. And from his perspective, what I found useful for sort of agile retrospectives and so forth is that it allows you to focus on aspects of certain scenarios, whether that's something that's going to happen in the future, or in case of a retrospective, it's something that happened in the past. So
Mhm.
if you look at the P layer, you're looking at the pluses or what went well within, whether it's a 2-week sprint that you're working on or whatever it is, you're focusing on what actually went well. So the pluses or the P's, you look at those, identify some of those, find some lessons learned. And then the M's are the minuses. What didn't work so well? How can we learn from that next time? And the I, which I find ironically interesting, is for interesting, where it's something that's not necessarily a plus or a minus, but it's something that just is of interest and something that you can actually learn from. So he's quite methodical about, focusing on one of each of those areas at a time, and just the whole team identifying some of those aspects. Now, sometimes you'll find that what somebody might see as a plus might be a minus for someone else. So that
Yeah.
obviously generates a lot of discussion as well. But I think that's the whole idea, is it's like a catalyst for people to
Mhm.
actually engage in discussion, not just, have a formula to apply. It's really trying to bring people together and have a useful discussion.
Mhm. So it sounds to me like a different type of golden triangle, not PMI is the golden triangle of, of scope, cost, and schedule, but another PMI, yeah, PMI triangle.
That's
Anyway,
exactly right.
yeah, that's funny. You got tons of quotes in your book. You make reference to Hewlett Packard's management by wandering around, what they called MBWA. Herman Edwards, he's a former American football player. He talked about lead from your feet, not your seat. And then you've got another quote from Rear Admiral Grace Marie Hooper. I had to look up some of these guys, and he says, you manage things and you lead people, manage things and lead people. So what does,
Yes.
from your perspective, what does leadership mean to you, especially in the project management role?
Yeah, well, I think primarily for me, it's about how to make people around you better. If people go into leadership thinking it's all about them, I think sometimes you might have the things the wrong way around. So a good leader, I find, is someone who is actually able to make those around them better. Now, there's a number of ways you can actually do that, obviously. But I think also Grace Hooper's quote is one of the ones that I really hold dear, where she was saying, like you said, we manage things and we lead people. Sometimes we sort of have this misconception that we can manage people, but by design, I don't think we can, unless you just want to look at them as, a resource in a project plan, but that's not really how best to engage with people. So I think in terms of leadership, I think it's just making people around you better, but also having the sensitivity of understanding that as human beings, we're going to have good days, we're going to have bad days, we're going to have average days, and it's how to, I guess, get the best out of the team without necessarily being like an overlord.
Right.
The analogy I also use is it's almost like one of a Sherpa that's helping people climb a mountain. So the Sherpa has probably been to the mountaintop a number of times, and the eager and the keen trekker is trying to follow suit. So the Sherpa is guiding you along the way through your career, telling you where there might be obstacles, not always holding your hand, but just being able to give you some useful experience and some expertise that will come in handy later down the track as well. So I use that Sherpa metaphor quite a bit because I think it just helps to encapsulate what leadership's all about.
Yeah, it's good. Shepherd your way down the way. Yeah, I like that. Effectiveness is doing the right things, they say. Efficiency is doing things right. We always talk about this in project management. Develop, even in business analysis, they say, well, developers want to do the right do things right, and the product owner wants to do the right things, and so on and so forth. So we still talk about this in project management as well. And you mentioned it in your book as well. Peter Drucker and Warren Bennis, they talk about doing the right thing is better than doing things right. So if this is the case, how can we be more effective as project managers?
Yeah, I think part of this is going to be a challenge sometimes, because one of the things I pointed out in the book is that a lot of the metrics that we use in measuring success for projects actually rely on efficiency. So we're talking about, hitting targets, potentially cutting costs, meeting deadlines, and so forth. Those all sort of speak of being efficient, right? Just trying to find how best to do the work itself. Whereas effectiveness is looking a bit outside that and looking at the overall strategy and saying, okay, so what are the non-tangible benefits? What are the positive outcomes we're actually trying to achieve from this? It doesn't really focus on the work necessarily. It looks at the outputs and the outcomes from that. So I think it's that sort of mind shift that, it's obviously you got to still, deliver something of use. But if you look at efficiency as, how many widgets can we produce in an hour? You look at effectiveness as, should we even be producing widgets in the first place? Is that actually of value to anyone? Because maybe we're in the wrong business. Maybe this is not what we should be doing. So I think, again, that's probably how to find a focus on not just going through and following, the rules, so to speak, and just saying, okay, we've got to deliver something. It's like questioning yourself and saying, okay, so if this is what we want to produce, what is that going to be useful for? How is the community around us going to be impacted? How are our staff going to be impacted? There's obviously with what's going on around the world these days, everyone's more aware about, the community around where companies operate. But I think just having that sort of shift in mindset for a PM or BA or anyone really who's involved in a project that's delivering anything of value actually helps to think of the impact that what we're doing is having on other people around us as well.
Yeah, it's all about the impact. I like this mindset concept, and again, in business analysis, we talk about the business analysis mindset, business analyst mindset, or in project management, this project manager mindset, same thing. And talking about one of the great minds out there, talking about mindset, one of the great minds out there is Simon Sinek. And he talks about, and you've mentioned him in your book too, when leaders care less about their people will care less. I like that. So as a project manager, your project leadership style does have an impact on how well or certainly how badly your project is delivered. And you say in your book, I like the quote, team members will work with you or turn you mental, depending on how you treat them. So in looking at those quotes, as a project manager, how should we treat our team in order to achieve success on a project?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing I'll say is how not to treat the team members, right? So again, I think I mentioned this just before that, if I was treating my team members just as a resource on a project plan, I'm unlikely to get much good results out of them, right? So it's really just engaging with people at a very personal level. Now, what I realized once I got into project management was that, I'm actually dealing with a lot of, human behavior, right? So that takes you into the space of human psychology, and how do you actually understand people? How do you read people? How do you overcome some of the biases that you have as an individual? Because we all have biases, obviously, but once we at least identify what they are, we've got a chance to maybe overcome them to, a greater or lesser degree. So I think, understanding what makes people tick, but also understanding that, that could change over a period of a project as well, right? So somebody could, have a certain, way of life at a certain point, but, over the next couple of months, that might change. So it's just being sensitive to how people are experiencing life, having social sensitivity skills, being able to read people's body language. Now that we're also a bit remote how we work, that's sometimes a bit of a challenge. If you're dealing with people over Zoom or some other mechanism, you can't always necessarily read the body language very well. But I think finding ways to overcome that, so you can actually understand when someone is frustrated, when someone is, giving you the right answers, but obviously not feeling, the right space that they should be in as well. So there's a number of, ways around that. And I did a lot of research, I guess, in that space, just because I realized, I didn't know much about that. So I thought I better find out. If I'm going to be working with people, I need to understand how people actually function. So, and that's an ongoing exercise, right? You never learn everything you need to learn on that. But I think understanding that and having a desire for making people excel in the field that they're in, and just taking the joy out of seeing other people excel is something that, as a PM, will actually serve you well.
Yeah, everything is all about transformational leadership, changing. Which actually on the topic of transformational leadership, because it is so important to project managers, especially when leading, through a crisis, like you mentioned. In your book, you talk about you say crisis moments are defining moments for an excelling leader. Crisis moments are defining moments for an excelling leader. I think they are, because that's when you really see a change take full effect, and those who are in control, or those who know to manage people well, can do it very, very well, very effectively during crisis times. So as leaders, how do project managers create better mindsets and better practices in order to lead through crisis?
Yeah, I think I remember, this is going back a few years now, but one of my team members, mentioned that in the middle of every project is a disaster, and he was pointing out that, how the team actually responds to that disaster is what really defines how the project will either fail or succeed. And I thought, wow, that's actually quite intense, but it made a lot of sense to me. And people have different ways. Some people have, they practice yoga or meditation or similar techniques just to maintain a sort of calm, demeanor, I suppose. And it's being able to, I guess, overcome some of those things, right? Because there's going to be a lot of noise around, as a project manager. There's going to be, stakeholders wanting to know certain things. There's going to be team members who are, going through different things, and you as an individual as well, you're going through stuff as well, right? So it's being able to sort of maintain that calm, even though there's a lot of noise around you. And I sort of liken that to, there's a proverb in Yoruba from Nigeria, where I come from, that says "Eru Obodo," which translates to "the river is never afraid." And the way I look at that is, the river flows regardless. Whatever happens upstream or whatever is going to happen downstream, the river finds a way to flow and navigate through where it needs to go. And I think using that analogy to help me, okay, you know what? Obviously, I don't do that all the time, but as a loose guide, I can look at that and say, you know what? It's good to just keep flowing. Yeah. Whatever it is. Sometimes, I listen to music just to de-stress or unwind. Whatever it is, that everybody has different ways to relax. But I think just having that sort of calmness around you also helps, because on the flip side, if it's all panic stations, then the team will feed off that as well. And, crises will escalate where they shouldn't have to. But if you can maintain a sort of a calm demeanor and just, have a bit of assurance around you as well, and just, keep the troops happy, then you're on the good way, I think, to having a well-gelled team.
Nice. Go with the flow, as they say. The Western version of that proverb, that Yoruba proverb. You're big in artificial intelligence, right? What's one part of artificial intelligence that stands out? Actually, you have a master's degree in artificial intelligence too. I should point out. Yeah. So what's one part of artificial intelligence that stands out to hugely benefit project managers, and why?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot. It's one of those areas I find really exciting, obviously, because I've spent some time in that space, but just because of the potential, as long as it's used in an ethical way, I think there's a lot of potential there. So there's things around, augmented reality or machine learning,
Mm,
but I think from a project management perspective, where I think there could be the most benefit will be in the area of, I guess, decision support.
mm,
So as project managers, we're faced with decisions on a very, very regular basis. So having a mechanism where, as a PM, you're able to have access to some anonymized data of potentially similar experiences in the past, whether it's within your organization or somewhere else, where people were at a crossroads, they had to make a decision, and tracking the outcome of that decision as well can sort of help a PM with her team. For example, if she's trying to make a decision, critical decision at the time, to say, you know what, if I make this decision, what are the pros and cons, and what could potentially happen, and just working out some scenario planning. I think using AI as a way to hold vast amounts of data,
mm,
and then also help reason through a process of what consequences might come out of a decision would definitely be something where I think AI can help. And again, we've got other things where we've got things like robotic process automation. We have bots in place these days, but I think being able to just support a decision making process is where I see a lot of value. And I've been trying to do a bit of work in that area as well in my sort of spare time, just to see
mm.
how we can not replace the human, but just help support that decision
Yeah.
making process.
Yeah, it's all about deeper insight with all that data. Yeah, and the
Yeah.
number crunching is so much easier with a machine than a human. But so it definitely helps us to build or to pull out much more insight, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
that's right.
your book, Leadership is Mental. Maybe you want to say a thing or two about it?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, basically, that came out 4 years ago, I believe. And what I also did after that was I actually came up with a website. So, leadershipismental.com
Hmm.
is where you can find out more about the book and about myself and what I do. And yeah, so basically, it's one of those things where I sort of struggle with it again with the title, because when you're trying to do these things, you kind of think, well, what's actually of relevance? And the way I looked at it is, a lot of what we do as leaders happens between our ears. A lot of it is actually mental. So we
Hmm.
need to understand what that is. But at the same time, I've got a 16-year-old nephew, and when you say to him when you say something is mental, he looks at it at a different level,
Mental.
right? So for him, it's a positive, So
Yeah, no doubt.
so there's different ways you can look at the word mental,
Yeah.
but I think it encompasses all that sort of stuff as well. So it's just being able to understand the environment around you and the people that you're actually working with, and just having a focus
Mm,
on being able to help those around you to make them better. Essentially,
yeah,
is the
right.
key to the book. Yeah.
I tell you, I bought it and my head was in that thing until I finished reading it. So it was quite mentally arousing. There's no doubt about that. If anyone of the audience from the audience wants to get in touch with you, you've mentioned obviously the website for the mental book. Any way else, yeah, that we can get in touch with you.
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn, obviously I'm on LinkedIn, so I'm happy to get invites from people. And yeah, leadershipismental.com, that has, all the contacts in there as well. So people can reach me via that website for sure.
Fantastic. Well, great. Well, thanks for giving us your time and patience with the big wide time change, and appreciate your attendance on the show.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me, Marcus. It's been a pleasure to have a chat with you today, no doubt.
Very much welcome, and have a great day. I'm sure the weather in Australia is 100 times better than the weather in Calgary right now. So
Well,
enjoy it. No? Oh, okay.
we're halfway through autumn actually, so
Oh, okay. Well,
it's
there you go. So,
probably not too dissimilar to you right now, but
oh,
it is getting cold for us is probably summer for you guys,
yeah,
but
yeah.
it's all relative, I guess.
It's all relative. Yeah. It's all mental.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, have
Good
yourself a
one.
great day.
All right, you too. Thanks, man.
Okay. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Cheers.